I guess I should start by telling you who I am, before you judge me. My name's Elle. I'm 26 now. But this story really began years ago, back when I thought my family's money meant I'd always have a safety net. I was born into a family where appearances mattered more than people. We weren't just comfortable, we were rich. My father was the kind of man who wore tailored suits even at breakfast, sitting at the end of our absurdly long mahogany dining table with the morning paper held like a weapon. My mother, always perfectly manicured, treated every family gathering like it was a photo shoot for some glossy lifestyle magazine. On paper, it looked perfect. 3 kids, my older brother, Nathan, the golden boy, my younger sister, Claire, the darling princess, and me, the middle child, the quiet one, the invisible one. Nathan was everything my father wanted in a son: charming, athletic, ambitious in ways that lined up neatly with Dad's empire. Claire was delicate, beautiful, spoiled, the apple of my mother's eye. And me? I was the odd one out. I wasn't particularly glamorous, and I didn't have the hunger for approval that my siblings seemed to thrive on. I liked books, long walks, daydreaming about building something of my own one day. If I'm being honest, I think my parents decided early on that I was unnecessary, not a problem, not a prodigy, just filler. And filler doesn't get investment. I remember being 15, sitting at that same dining table, nervously sharing an idea I had for an online store. I'd been sketching designs for notebooks and planners, and I thought, why not? People buy cute stationery all the time. My father laughed, actually laughed, and said, Elle, stop wasting your time. Nobody's going to take you seriously. You're not a businesswoman, you're a dreamer. That word stuck with me, dreamer. It sounded harmless, but the way he said it was sharp, like a diagnosis. My mother didn't even look up from her coffee. Nathan smirked. Claire rolled her eyes. That was my place in the family, the quiet embarrassment. Still, I went through the motions. I went to college, paid for entirely by them. Of course, studied business, because at least then I thought I could prove them wrong, and graduated with decent grades. But once the cap and gown were put away, reality hit me. There was no plan for me. Nathan was already being groomed to take over parts of my father's company. Claire was working on her fashion blog, fully bankrolled by my mother. Me? I asked about internships, about maybe shadowing someone in Dad's company, and he shut it down immediately. We don't do charity positions, Elle. If you can't find your own way, maybe you weren't cut out for this. It wasn't like I didn't try. I applied to jobs, hundreds of them. But when your last name carries weight, people assume you don't actually need the job. They think you're just dabbling. I got rejection after rejection, and every time, I felt that word again, dreamer. The worst part? My parents didn't even pretend to care. It was like they enjoyed watching me flounder. My mom's favorite line was, "You need to marry well, Elle. Stability comes from a husband, not silly little business ideas." I wanted to scream every time she said it, but I learned to swallow my anger. So, yeah, that's the kind of family I came from. Wealthy, polished, cruel, and me, stuck in the middle, trying desperately to believe I was more than just filler. But I think what really shaped me wasn't just the coldness. It was knowing deep down that if I ever fell, they wouldn't catch me. And one day, I did fall. Hard. The thing about my family is that everything was a performance. Dinner conversations weren't conversations, they were competitions. Whoever had the best story, the most impressive achievement, got the spotlight. Nathan would go on about closing a deal, or some internship he snagged thanks to Dad's connections. Claire would gush about her new designer wardrobe or the brand collaboration Mom arranged for her. And me? I learned to stay quiet. Whenever I did try to share something, like landing a small freelance gig or even just a personal win, it was met with blank stares. Or worse, sarcastic claps. Oh wow, Elle got paid $200 for designing a website. How cute. I started noticing how different they acted around outsiders. With guests, my parents transformed into these warm, generous hosts. My siblings became angels, but the second the front door shut, the mask slipped, and the cruelty came out like venom. It was suffocating. That's probably why I clung so hard to the few people outside my family who actually cared about me. My college roommate, Jess, was one of them. She came from nothing, literally worked 3 jobs to keep herself afloat, but she never once made me feel like I was lesser or weird for wanting more. Jess was the kind of friend who'd sit with me at 2 a.m., eating stale chips, listening to me vent about my family while reminding me I wasn't crazy for feeling unloved. Elle, she'd say, "You're not broken, you're just in the wrong garden. You can't bloom where you're not watered." Those words carried me through so many nights. I wish I could say my parents ever had a moment of softness with me, but no. My mother's affection was conditional. It only existed when I made her look good, if I lost weight, if I wore the right clothes, if I stood quietly beside her at galas. She'd smile and call me her beautiful middle child, but the second I spoke out of line or failed at something, it was ice again. My father? He didn't even bother pretending. To him, respect was earned through power, and since I had none, I wasn't worth his time. And Nathan and Claire, God, they thrived in the cruelty. They mirrored my parents, maybe because it was easier than being on the receiving end. Nathan treated me like a nuisance, someone too fragile to survive in the real world. Claire copied my mother's passive-aggressive digs, always delivered with a sweet smile. The worst fights always started when I asked for help. Not extravagant help, just basic support. Rent money, a loan for a car, once, even just groceries. Every time, they'd twist it into proof that I was pathetic. A burden. I remember one night vividly. I was 23, sitting at that same damned dining table, hands shaking as I asked if I could borrow money to cover rent while I looked for steady work. My father slammed his fork down so hard the sound echoed. "Enough, Elle. We're not your safety net. If you can't stand on your own 2 feet, then maybe you'll finally learn." Nathan laughed. Claire smirked. My mother sighed dramatically, as though my existence was an inconvenience. I went home that night to an empty fridge and cried myself to sleep. That was the moment I realized Jess was right. I couldn't bloom here, but at the time, I didn't know how I was going to survive outside their shadow. What I did know, though, was that I'd never forget the way they looked at me across that table, like I was disposable. And someday, somehow, I was going to prove them wrong. It all came crashing down on a Sunday evening. The house was buzzing with noise. My mom had insisted on a family dinner, which really just meant another performance for her friends. I showed up because I didn't want to deal with the guilt trips that would inevitably follow if I didn't. The dining room looked like something out of a movie. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery polished so bright it caught the chandelier light like fire. Everyone was dressed to impress. My father at the head of the table, Nathan on his right in some designer suit, Claire on his left, practically glowing in a new dress mom had probably handpicked. And me, wearing the nicest thing I owned, which suddenly felt cheap under their stares. Dinner started like always. Stories of Nathan's brilliant internship, Claire talking about how her blog had gotten another sponsor, my parents beaming with pride. Then my mom turned to me, her voice sharp but wrapped in honey. "So, Elle," she said, her wine glass poised delicately between her fingers, "what have you been doing with your time lately?" The table went quiet, all eyes on me. I swallowed hard. My heart was pounding so loud I swore they could hear it. I'd rehearsed answers in my head, half-truths, things that would make me look less like a failure, but the truth came tumbling out instead. "I've been struggling. I'm looking for work, but it's been hard. I wanted to ask if I could borrow some money for rent this month, just until I get back on my feet." For a moment, there was silence. Then my father laughed. The sound was sharp, cruel, and everyone else followed. Nathan chuckled into his glass. Claire smirked, whispering something under her breath. "Elle," my father said finally, his voice dripping with disdain, "you're 23 years old. We've given you every advantage, and you still come crawling back like a child asking for pocket money?" I felt my face burn. "I'm not crawling, I just need a little help." "No," he snapped, slamming his palm against the table so hard the silverware rattled. "Enough is enough. We're done funding your little pity party. You want to be independent? Then be independent." My mother sighed theatrically, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Darling, we can't enable this behavior. You've had opportunities most people would kill for. If you can't make it work, maybe you're just not cut out for success." Nathan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Maybe she should start a GoFundMe. Isn't that what people do when they fail?" Laughter erupted again. I wanted to disappear, The walls felt like they were closing in. My hands were shaking under the table, nails digging into my palms just to keep me grounded. I just needed help, I whispered. And you won't get it here, my father said flatly. From now on, you're on your own. Consider this your wake-up call. Something broke inside me that night. I left before dessert, walking out into the cold with tears streaming down my face, their laughter echoing in my ears. I'd always known they didn't see me as equal, but hearing it spoken so plainly, that I wasn't worth even a fraction of the support they showered on Nathan and Claire, cut deeper than I thought possible. That was the night they cut me off. And it was the night I realized, if I was ever going to survive, I couldn't rely on them again. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. I moved back into my tiny one-bedroom apartment, the kind of place where the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor arguing, where the heater rattles in the middle of the night, where the only light in the kitchen flickers like it's about to die. My fridge was almost always empty. Most nights, dinner was instant noodles or stale crackers I could buy with loose change. I got a job at a coffee shop near campus, working long shifts behind the counter. The smell of espresso clung to my clothes. My hands were always raw from washing dishes, and my feet ached constantly. On top of that, I picked up odd jobs wherever I could, tutoring high school kids, dog walking, even handing out flyers on street corners. But it was never enough. Rent loomed over me like a guillotine. I'll never forget one night in particular. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, counting coins to see if I had enough for groceries. Spoiler, I didn't. My stomach growled so loudly it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I broke down sobbing, my head in my hands. The words from that dinner replayed in my mind over and over. We're done funding your pity party. You're not cut out for success. Go start a GoFundMe. Their voices haunted me, but under all that pain, something else started to grow. Anger. Why was I begging people who clearly enjoyed watching me suffer? Why was I letting their laughter define me? That night, I opened my laptop. The screen lit up my tear-stained face, and I started researching everything I could about building something of my own. Businesses, startups, freelancing, side hustles, anything. I devoured articles, YouTube tutorials, forums. I didn't care how small it was, I just needed a way to stand on my own 2 feet. Jess noticed the shift in me. She'd stop by after her shifts, plop down on my bed, and watch me scribbling in notebooks. You look possessed, she teased once, tossing me a bag of chips, but in a good way, like, you finally had enough. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I have. I'm done being their failure. If they won't help me, fine, I'll figure it out myself, and one day, they'll regret ever laughing at me. The words felt foreign in my mouth at first, like I was lying to myself, but the more I said them, the truer they became. Day by day, the bitterness turned into fuel. Every rude customer, every rejection letter, every ache in my body became proof that I was still standing. I was surviving without them. And slowly, a seed of something bigger started to take root. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to build something so strong, so undeniable, that they'd have no choice but to see me. Even if it killed me in the process. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, it was messy, clumsy steps, small failures, late nights that left me bleary-eyed at my coffee shop job the next morning. But once I'd made that promise to myself, to build something of my own, there was no turning back. I started small. My first step was freelancing. I already had a knack for design, so I threw together a portfolio using work I'd done in college, plus a few fake mock-ups I created just to showcase my skills. I signed up for every platform I could find, a Fiverr, Upwork, even sketchy Craigslist gigs. At first, I got nothing. Days of refreshing my inbox, hoping for a single client. Then, one night, I got a message. It was from a woman who needed a simple logo for her Etsy shop. She was offering $25. It felt insulting, almost laughable, but I took it. I worked on that logo for hours, obsessing over every pixel like it was the most important project in the world. When I delivered it, she loved it, left me a glowing review. That $25 meant more to me than anything I'd ever been given by my parents. It wasn't just money, it was proof that I could create something valuable on my own. From there, I hustled harder. One job turned into two turned into 5. Soon, my evenings were filled with client work, my tiny desk cluttered with notebooks, empty coffee cups, and sticky notes plastered to the wall with deadlines scrawled in red marker. Jess became my unofficial cheerleader. She'd drop by with takeout when she saw I hadn't eaten, or stay up with me while I worked, flipping through magazines on my bed. "You're different now," she said one night, watching me sketch out designs for a small business website. "Different how?" I asked, without looking up. "Before, you looked like you were drowning. Now, you look like you're swimming." "Barely." "Sure, but you're moving forward." I smiled at that. For the first time, I felt like maybe she was right. But freelancing was just the beginning. I started noticing patterns, what clients needed most, what problems kept coming up, what gaps existed in the market. That's when the seed of a bigger idea took hold. What if I built something that wasn't just me trading time for money? What if I created a business that could grow beyond me? The idea terrified me. After all, hadn't my father said I wasn't cut out for business? That I was just a dreamer? But maybe being a dreamer was exactly what I needed to be. So I started sketching plans, ideas, business models scribbled in messy handwriting at 3 a.m. I researched until my eyes blurred. I took free online courses, sat in on webinars, devoured podcasts on entrepreneurship. Every new piece of knowledge felt like another weapon in my arsenal. Of course, not everything went smoothly. My laptop crashed one night while I was working on a client project. I cried so hard I nearly gave up. But Jess reminded me, "If you quit now, you'll just prove them right." So I picked myself back up, borrowed an old laptop from a friend, and kept going. Slowly, the vision became clearer. I wasn't just going to freelance forever. I was going to start my own digital branding agency, a company that would help small businesses, people like that Etsy shop owner, create identities that actually made them stand out. I didn't have money for office space, so my apartment became my headquarters. The kitchen table was my desk. The floor was my filing cabinet. My bed doubled as a couch when Jess came over to visit the CEO. "CEO of what?" she teased, tossing a pillow at me. I grinned, even though my eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Of the empire I'm building." And in that moment, I believed it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just existing, I was creating. And I swore I'd never let anyone take that away from me. The first real breakthrough came a year later. By then, my branding agency, though it was really just me with a laptop, had started attracting steady clients. Not just small Etsy shops anymore, but mid-sized businesses that needed full rebrands. I had a website, a logo, a professional email address. I even managed to land a small local cafe chain as a client, which meant my first big paycheck. When I deposited that check, I cried in the bank parking lot, not because of the money itself, but because it proved my father was wrong. I was cut out for this. But growth brought new challenges. I was drowning in work. One person couldn't handle the volume of clients I had anymore. So I made the terrifying decision to hire someone. It was a leap of faith. What if I couldn't afford them? What if they quit? What if they stole my clients? I ended up bringing on a freelancer named Alex. At first, he was perfect, talented, motivated, someone who actually seemed to believe in the vision. With his help, I could take on bigger projects, deliver faster, impress more clients. For a while, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. But then, it happened. One morning, I opened my email to find several angry messages from clients. They were confused, upset, saying they'd received invoices from another company claiming to be affiliated with me. Turns out, Alex had been quietly poaching clients, setting up his own agency behind my back, using all the systems and templates I'd built. I felt sick. Betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. After everything I'd been through, after fighting so hard to build something real, someone I trusted had ripped it out from under me. I confronted him. I'll never forget the smirk on his face when he said, "It's just business, Elle, survival of the fittest." Those words echoed the cruelty I thought I'd left behind with my family. For a moment, I thought about quitting. I thought maybe my father was right after all, that I wasn't tough enough, that I was too naive. But then, another voice cut through the noise. Jess's voice. "You're not broken, Elle. You're in the wrong garden." And she was right. Alex's betrayal didn't mean I wasn't capable. It meant I had to be smarter, stronger. So I let him go. I lost a few clients, but I doubled down on the ones who stayed. I improved my contracts, built stronger systems, and swore never to let someone use me like that again. It hurt, God, it hurt, but it also hardened me. Because I realized something that day: business wasn't just about talent or ideas. It was about resilience, about taking the hits and refusing to stay down. So I picked myself back up, brushed off the dust, and kept going. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, my company started to grow again. Not just because I was good at what I did, but because I refused to let anyone, family or otherwise, write my ending for me. There are certain moments in life you never forget. The kind that burn themselves into your memory so vividly you can recall every detail: the smell in the air, the color of the walls, the exact sound of your own heartbeat. For me, one of those moments was the day I signed the lease for my first office. It wasn't glamorous, just a tiny space in a building that smelled faintly of dust and fresh paint, with flickering fluorescent lights and beige walls that looked like they hadn't been touched since the 90s. But to me, it was everything. No more working out of my kitchen or balancing my laptop on my knees in bed. This was my office, my headquarters, proof that my dream wasn't just some fantasy, it was real. I walked in holding the keys, Jess trailing behind me with a bag of takeout to christen the place. I stood in the middle of the empty room, my footsteps echoing against the bare floor, and I just laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound bounced off the walls like it belonged there. Jess grinned, setting down the food. CEO vibes. Elle, look at you. CEO of 2 desks and a window that won't open, I joked, but my chest swelled with pride. We sat cross-legged on the floor, eating noodles straight from the carton, planning out what the space would become. Desks along the wall, a whiteboard for brainstorming, maybe a couch for clients one day. It felt surreal. From there, everything started accelerating. I hired 2 more freelancers, then an assistant. My client list grew longer every month, and for the first time, I wasn't terrified of rent or groceries. I bought a new laptop, then new clothes, then, months later, my very first car. Nothing fancy, but mine, paid in full, no help from anyone. And then came the contract that changed everything. A mid-sized tech startup reached out. They needed a complete rebrand, logo, website, social strategy, the works. It was the biggest project I'd ever landed, and I threw myself into it with everything I had. Nights turned into mornings, coffee into lifeblood, my team and I working like maniacs. When we finally launched the new brand, it blew up. Investors took notice, the company grew, and suddenly, my agency was the one people were talking about. Referrals poured in, emails flooded my inbox. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The best part? For the first time, I started giving myself permission to enjoy it. I bought a tailored blazer, not to impress anyone else, but because I felt like I'd earned it. I went out to dinner with Jess and didn't panic when the check came. I even allowed myself one luxury splurge, a pair of heels I'd been eyeing for months. Slipping them on, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't the invisible middle child anymore. She wasn't the pathetic daughter begging at her family's table. She was someone who had built something from nothing. One night, after a long day at the office, I sat at my new desk, still scratched, still secondhand, and whispered to myself, "You did it." And for the first time, I actually believed it. Success has a funny way of snowballing. One win leads to another, and before you know it, the person everyone doubted becomes the one they can't stop talking about. That's what happened to me. Over the next couple of years, my agency exploded. We weren't just a scrappy little branding team anymore, we were a full-service company, handling everything from design to marketing to PR. I had an office with an actual view, a staff of 10, then 20, then 50, clients across the country, awards, recognition. It still felt surreal sometimes. I'd walk into our office, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, my team buzzing with energy, and think, is this really mine? Did I really build this? But nothing was more surreal than realizing who we were competing against. Because somewhere along the way, without even meaning to, My company started cutting into my father's industry. He owned a traditional marketing firm, big, old-fashioned, stuck in its ways. For years, they dominated the market, relying on legacy clients and reputation. But times were changing. Businesses wanted fresh ideas, digital strategies, creativity, and guess who had all of that? Me. At first, I didn't notice. I was too focused on growth. But then clients started telling me outright, "We left your father's firm for yours. We needed innovation, and you're delivering what they couldn't." The irony was almost poetic. While my company soared, theirs started to stumble. I'd hear whispers through the grapevine: missed targets, shrinking contracts, dissatisfied clients. Nathan, who had been groomed to inherit it all, was scrambling. Claire, whose influencer career had plateaued, was burning through money like water. And my parents? They were suddenly quieter, less smug, less untouchable. I'll admit it, I reveled in it. Every time I signed a new contract, every time my company's name appeared in a press release, I imagined my father reading it, his jaw tightening, his pride cracking. But the true turning point came one Monday morning. I was in my office, sipping coffee, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Elle, you have a meeting request. From your family." I almost choked on my drink. "What do you mean?" "They emailed this morning. They want to schedule a discussion about opportunities. Apparently, they're interested in working with us." I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. My family, the same people who had mocked me, cut me off, laughed at the idea of me running a business, wanted to work with me. It felt like the universe itself was handing me the sweetest revenge. And yet, beneath the laughter, there was something else, a strange calm, because as much as I'd dreamed of this moment, imagined rubbing my success in their faces, it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I'd built something real, something powerful, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. Still, I accepted the meeting, because part of me wanted to see the looks on their faces when they realized the daughter they'd thrown away was now the one holding all the cards. And oh, I was not disappointed. The day of the meeting, I walked into the restaurant with my head held high. Not the girl they once mocked, not the daughter who begged for scraps, but Elle, CEO, founder, the woman who had carved her name into the world without their help. I chose the restaurant deliberately, sleek, modern, with tall glass windows that reflected the city skyline, the kind of place where people went to be seen, and I wanted them to be seen. When I arrived, my family was already seated, my father in his usual pressed suit, my mother looking stiff and uncomfortable, Nathan fiddling with his phone, and Claire pretending to be interested in the wine list. The moment I approached the table, they all looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in their eyes I'd never seen before. Not pity, not condescension, but respect. My father stood halfway, offering a handshake. "Elle," his voice was clipped, almost rehearsed. "Thank you for meeting us." I smiled politely, sliding into my chair. Of course, I was curious. The waiter poured water. Small talk passed like stones skipping across a pond. Then finally, my father cleared his throat. "We'll be direct. Our firm has been facing challenges. The market has shifted faster than we anticipated. Clients are moving toward digital-first agencies." He paused, jaw tight. "Your agency has excelled in this area." I let the silence stretch, let them squirm. "So," my mother interjected, smoothing her napkin, "we were thinking, perhaps there's an opportunity for collaboration, a merger, even." Nathan leaned forward. "We could combine resources, our legacy, your fresh ideas. It could be mutually beneficial." Claire nodded eagerly, her smile just a little too bright. "Yeah, Elle, imagine us working together again, like family." I almost laughed. Like family. The same family that turned their backs on me when I was at my lowest. The same family that let me cry alone in the dark while they drank champagne. Instead, I set my glass down gently and folded my hands. "Interesting proposal," I said, "but let's be clear about one thing. You're not here because you value me. You're here because you need me." The words hung in the air like a blade. My father's jaw twitched. My mother looked down at her plate. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Claire's smile faltered. I leaned in. "Years ago, I came to you for help. Do you remember what you did? You laughed. You mocked me. You told me I'd fail. No one spoke. But I didn't fail. I built something. Something stronger, faster, smarter than what you clung to. And now, you sit here, asking me for a lifeline. I could see it, the cracks in their armor, the shame they tried to swallow, the bitterness they couldn't hide. I took a breath. My voice softened, but it was sharper than any scream. And here's my answer: no. There will be no merger, no collaboration. I didn't climb out of the hole you left me in just to pull you out of yours. You built your empire on dismissing people like me. Now you can watch mine surpass yours. The silence was deafening. Nathan looked furious. His face flushed. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I cut him off. Claire's eyes welled with frustrated tears. My mother whispered my name like a plea. But my father just stared at me. Cold, calculating. But even he couldn't mask the defeat in his eyes. I stood, gathering my bag. This meeting is over. I don't need validation from people who once saw me as nothing. And I will never again let you dictate my worth. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt like thunder. For the first time, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away in victory. That night, I stood in my apartment by the window, looking out over the glittering skyline. My reflection stared back at me, older, stronger, no longer that invisible girl desperate for approval. I thought about my family, about the look in their eyes when they realized the power had shifted, about how, for years, I dreamed of revenge, of making them crawl. And yes, I got it, but it didn't feel the way I thought it would. Because in that moment, I realized something. True success isn't about rubbing it in the faces of those who doubted you. It's about no longer needing to. My revenge wasn't turning them down at that table. My revenge was every contract I signed, every employee I empowered, every night I slept soundly knowing I'd made it on my own. They had tried to break me, but in doing so, they forged me. I turned away from the window, smiling faintly. Tomorrow, I had meetings, deadlines, a company to run. My life wasn't about them anymore, it was about me, about the future I was still building, one brick at a time. And maybe one day, they'd finally understand the lesson. You don't measure a person's worth by how small you can make them feel. You measure it by how high they rise after you tried to bury them. As I switched off the light and let the city glow spill across the room, I whispered the words I'd been waiting to say my entire life. I won. And this time, it wasn't revenge. It was freedom.